Good evening and welcome to Kauffman Corner, a Kansas City baseball podcast with you as always, at least two in a row here as we are out of the gates. Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHP and, of course, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, a man who's authored on many different platforms all over the place, now chooses to share his wisdom on the Kansas City Royals with us here on the Kauffman Corner podcast. Thank you for joining us here on the podcast. If you're catching us on the pod, on down the road. Remember, we do stream live each and every Sunday night starting at 10 o'clock. You can catch that. Just follow the good doctor at Jazayerli or follow me at Soren Petro. We're always tweeting out the link and welcome everybody to the mix. We've got a lot we want to get to tonight. We're going to talk about Cal Eldred versus Terry Bradshaw. Why is Cal Eldred seem to be under the gun, yet the Royals aren't really scoring runs either. Brad Keller looking good for a second consecutive start. What's his future with the ball club? What's this batting order supposed to look like? Is Andrew Benintendi, is it time to sign him? Or are we talking trade? What's the ultimate ending for Andrew Benintendi with the Kansas City Royals? Hunter Dozier appears to have his game back. We'll get to Rany's minor league minute. Got a player we want to focus on there. Maybe a little bit about Mondesi. Concerns about Whit Merrifield, slow start. Asa Lacy has had his second start today. We will try to get to it all if there is time. Rany, how are you, my friend?
I am good. The Royals tried to ruin my enthusiasm for this new podcast with their 5-game losing streak, but it'll take more than that to knock me off my perch. I'm back.
And I appreciate that we haven't, we're going to get at least two out of you. So that's good to know. Tell me, though, how about it? Cal Eldred is the guy who's frustrated, and we've already got one of the comments that are in here. Stu says, Rany, when will the media realize that Royals fans aren't freaking out about the Royals' young pitching? Okay, that's one thing, although I think some fans are freaking out about one Cal Eldred. But one of your thoughts is, like, where's maybe the frustration with the hitting side of the equation as well?
Yeah, we obviously spent a lot of time talking about Cal Eldred on our first podcast, and he's certainly gotten a lot of attention over the last year, maybe even more. But it does occur to me that the person in the Royals organization who might be happiest that all the attention is on Cal Eldred is Terry Bradshaw, because I mean, I wonder how many, for whatever reason, every Royals fan knows the name of the pitching coach, but the hitting coach's name kind of goes under the radar. And for all the talk about what the Royals are doing at the minor league level, I feel like the names of some of the Royals minor league hitting coordinators, guys like Drew Saylor and Alex Zumwalt, Keone Duren, who was promoted to assistant hitting coach at the major league level this year. I feel like fans might almost be more familiar with those names, the guys who turned Dick Prado's career around, and MJ Melendez, and even the guy Mike Tozar, who I don't think is an official employee of the team, but who helped to get Jorge Soler's career back on track and has worked with Salvador Perez's swing in the off season and helped both of those guys hit 48 home runs with the Royals. I feel like all the guys get talked about who are helping the Royals hitters, except the guy who is supposed to be their best hitting coach, the guy at the major league level, Terry Bradshaw. And here we are a week into the season, and in 8 games, the Royals have scored 25 runs. And if anything, they might almost be lucky to have that many runs. They're hitting 207, slugging 303, 263 on base percentage. I mean, it's amazing how quickly this team sort of reverts to form. You would think at a small sample size anything is possible, but they are second to last in the league in home runs, second to last in the league in walks, first in steals. They're always at the top of the table in stolen bases, but they're doing what they always do. They don't hit for power, they don't walk, and if they're not hitting singles, they're not scoring any runs. And at some point, we have to ask ourselves, just like we asked ourselves why Cal Eldred is still employed, what exactly is Terry Bradshaw doing for this organization? If year after year you don't have hitters who are dramatically outperforming their expectations, you don't have guys who are surprise breakout candidates, but year after year you have guys who are disappointing, whether it's Hunter Dozier the last couple of years and what he's done. Obviously this year it's only been a week, but Carlos Santana is not hitting at all. Maybe Carlos Santana is just done. I don't know if you blame that on the hitting coach, but Whit Merrifield is hitting terribly, and Adalberto Mondesi is still kind of a mess. At what point does it become less about the players and more about the coaches? Because the Royals claim they believe in these players, and if you believe in these players and they're not performing, somebody is responsible for that. And it gets back down to that core of accountability that we talked about last week, which is there accountability when people are not performing in this organization?
Yeah, and believe me, I'm fine with Terry Bradshaw's name being put out there as a guy that the Royals need to take a look at, as long as Cal Eldred stays there as well. Let me be clear.
There's room for both.
And listen, I like both these guys. I've interviewed them. I've been around them, sat and chatted with them at spring training before. They're both top shelf guys, right? So I want to be clear. Anyone who's new to this podcast, Rany and I, neither one of us are guys that just come around and say, "Hey, fire this guy, fire that guy." You know, we recognize the fact that these are human beings, and you fire somebody, families have to be uprooted, all the things that go to it. So, you know, I'm not at the point. I think we were very close to being at that point on Cal Eldred. I don't know that the organization was. I don't know that Mike Matheny was, but I think the fan base, you know, they're always the radical fans that want to fire everybody instantaneously. But I mean, I think that we were about a year or so ago heading that direction, and a couple of things turned to the better. Brad Keller has been really the success story for Cal Eldred. Who's the success story for Terry Bradshaw, right? Like, who's the guy that you point to and say, okay, well, he did this, he fixed this, this is why we're going to stay the course with him? Or is he really, maybe if we dug into it, Rany, we'd find that he's basically just a video coordinator, that what he does is put together the cut-ups and try to go through the drills, but there's somebody else behind the scenes that's actually the guy with the swing. I don't know, but there doesn't seem to be the, Kevin Seitzer with Alex Gordon's success story that really drove that relationship and cemented Kevin Seitzer as a hitting coach. Unfortunately, not as long as I would have liked, but that was his card. Is there one there for Terry Bradshaw?
That's sort of the point. I mean, like you said, even with Cal Eldred, you can point to a Brad Keller and be like, maybe that doesn't happen without Cal Eldred. I don't know if there's a single player that I would say dramatically has outperformed what you would expect that you can pin their success on Terry Bradshaw. I mean, the timeline would fit best with Whit Merrifield, I suppose, as somebody who nobody really took as seriously as a prospect in the minor leagues. But I've never gotten the impression that Merrifield's success in the major leagues was the result of a swing change. We see that so frequently in baseball nowadays, where guys completely remake their swings, even at the major league level, and transform their careers. With Merrifield, it seemed to be a combination of basically a better workout routine in the offseason, just being in better physical shape, being stronger to the ball, and being able to hit the ball for more power, and then allowing his natural speed to allow to beat out infield hits and keep his batting average up. I've never heard anybody pin his success on a swing change, let alone a swing change that was pushed by his hitting coach, Terry Bradshaw. And I just think that's just so striking when you consider how all of those other guys I mentioned, guys who work in the minor leagues or on the almost like consultants for the organization, where there have been specific player success stories that have been attributed to those guys. Terry Bradshaw's name just never comes up, and that may not be a bad thing. Like you say, it may be him working behind the scenes in other ways. I'm not, like you said, I'm not here to say fire Terry Bradshaw today, but I think at some point we just have to start turning the heat up a little on the organization, on people in the organization, and just start asking questions. What does this person do? How can they do their job better? If they can't do their job better, is there somebody else out there who could do that job better? And that's the thing. The Royals are not lacking for candidates within the organization who I think have proven that they deserve the opportunity to be a hitting coach at the major league level.
Right. And this is a prevalent thought. Terry says, yet another slow start. And unfortunately, we've seen this too many times. And I think that is the frustration. Now, I will say it's very early. In a week from now, if they have a good week, you'll be talking about how great things are, right? That it doesn't take much to get things looking well. Is the batting order, though, part of an equation that can be fixed? I will tell you, one of the things I talked about this week on my radio show was I'm stunned by the Royals' constant belief that a player, if you're not on the big league club, right, you're not good enough to crack the 26-man roster, right? How the Royals continually go from a guy is not on the big league club to batting second or third. And we touched on this a little bit last week, I think, did we, on Bobby Witt, about how he's batting too. So we've now seen it. He did get a couple of hits the other day. What is the ideal batting order for this team? And is it time to say Nicky Lopez, who I like? I mean, if you can get a lineup where Nicky Lopez belongs ninth, you got a championship hitting club. Because to have that kind of on-base percentage down at the bottom is great for when you turn the order over. But is Nicky Lopez at a point that we can say you can hang your hat on counting on him, putting that kind of on-base percentage up, and he should be at the top, and Whit Merrifield needs to find a different spot?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it comes down less to what you think of Nicky Lopez and more about what you think of Whit Merrifield at this point in his career. And I think it's time that we start, again, asking questions, not making pronouncements, but asking questions. What is Whit Merrifield at this point in his career? Because to me, that's the question here. Nicky Lopez is a phenomenal number 9 hitter. We both agree on that. And if you have a lineup where you can bat him ninth, that's an incredible luxury. But he might be the best leadoff hitter on this team right now. I think you can make that case. Now, Whit Merrifield has been in that role for years now, has had a phenomenal career, especially given what anyone expected from him. I think 50 years from now, if you're at a bar and the trivia question is, name every American leaguer who's led the American League in stolen bases 3 times in their career.
Right.
I mean, right, I off the top of my head, you think of Ty Cobb or Ricky Henderson. Who's going to think of Whit Merrifield? And yet Whit Merrifield has led the league in steals, not once, not 3 times. That's not a fluke.
Yeah, but to your point, isn't that a question that no one's going to care to ask in that time frame?
Because nobody cares about stolen bases anymore, right? Yeah, well, that's part of it. That's the thing. Steals alone do not make you a great leadoff hitter. What makes you a great leadoff hitter is on-base percentage.
Right.
And his on-base percentage since 2020, he's gone 325, which is average at best, 317 last year. And okay, it's only 8 games, but he's hitting, he's got a 176 OBP right now. So since the beginning of the 2020 season, we're talking about 230 games here, he has a 314 on-base percentage in the major leagues. That's playable, but that's not a leadoff hitter playable. I mean, with that kind of speed and, doubles pop, that's a guy you can bat 5th or 6th. And he's got enough singles and on extra base ability to drive in some runs. And then you put that speed in front of the bottom of the order where you've got singles hitters, you got guys who don't have a lot of power, and allow him to use his speed on the bases then. But right now, he doesn't get on base much. And when he does, the stolen bases aren't as valuable when you're batting in front of guys who might hit the ball 400 feet for a home run anyway and make your stolen base sort of irrelevant. So, I think it's a very good question. Should Whit Merrifield be down in the lineup? Nicky Lopez, move him up to 1. I know you bring the point up about Bobby Witt. Should he really be batting second? That doesn't bother me that much. I think you can make him earn it, but I don't. I mean, if Bobby Witt isn't worthy of the number 2 spot by the end of the year, then I think the Royals have bigger problems than the fact that their number 2 hitter wasn't good. Bobby Witt hasn't developed. If he is what we think he is, I'm fine with him there. But I think we need to start asking the question: is Whit Merrifield, who is now 33 years old, guys really start to fall off a cliff a little bit at the age of 32. And you look at his age 32 season offensively. I mean, his OPS plus, just to give you a very basic measure, you go back to his 2018 season when he was 29 years old. His OPS plus goes 120, 111, 105, above average all 3 years. 92 last year. Is this the cliff with Whit Merrifield? I hope not. I don't think he's done, but if that OPS is 80 or 85 this year, as a right fielder, is he really that valuable? And of course, this gets back to the bigger question of, are the Royals constantly making the mistake of holding on to players who are valuable now when they don't have a good team, rather than trading for future assets, which would actually help them when they're ready to contend? Did the Royals miss a golden opportunity to trade Whit Merrifield, just like they missed a golden opportunity 15 years ago to trade Joakim Soria before he blew out his elbow? I mean, this is something Dayton Moore has done throughout his career. He falls in love with his players, which on a personal level is a wonderful thing. But you're not there to be a wonderful to your employees. You're there to build a winning organization. And the Royals repeatedly pass up opportunities to build for the future by trading players that are good now, but on teams that aren't going anywhere.
Well, and listen, nobody loves their players more than the Royals, and that obviously was something that contributed to winning a world championship and hanging 2 American League pennants in 14 and 15. out there at Kauffman Stadium, and flags fly forever. But there are times that the organization feels, I said it this in a moment of frustration, I said, the object of a baseball organization is not to be a Make-A-Wish Foundation, right? To make sure you get everybody to the big leagues and everybody gets a time to call themselves a big leaguer. The object is to win baseball games. It's professional baseball. And I think the frustrating times we have to recognize there is a positive side to it. I do believe the way that they handle their players. And we talked about it, the players that they were able to attract in the shortened and the pandemic shortened draft and everything. I think there's something to it. And I'm willing to also say, is Whit Merrifield the cost of having Salvi become one of the best power hitters in baseball? Let's say Salvador Perez hits 35 to 45 home runs. He backs it up, and it looks like he's going to transition into a guy that he can catch. But if Melendez is going to take over those duties, he swings a big enough bat that maybe having Salvi as your DH is fine. Then was it worth the price of saying, okay, we're not moving? Because really the two big names that were talked about during the entire rebuild were Whit Merrifield, because he's older, but when he finally got to the big leagues, Whit Merrifield and Salvador Perez. Is baseball, I always say NFL draft picks, if you love a guy in the NFL draft and you say this is the guy they have to draft, then you should never be given the keys to the drafting process, because nobody is a guy that can't fail. Is it the same way in predicting baseball players' aging process now? And so that they double down and said, we want a veteran core royal to be there when the young guys come up to be the leader. Ideally, you want both those guys. You get an English speaking and a Spanish speaking leader, which anyone who's been in a clubhouse knows those are important things to have. That's why Hosmer has value, or certainly did with the Royals, value, because he really bridged that gap because he was English and Spanish speaking. And you could watch the dynamics of him bringing the clubhouse together. But is it reality that in baseball, look, we're throwing two darts at this and we're hoping to hit one? We keep Merrifield and Salvi. If one of them is that veteran guy that can still play at a high level, we've got guys that help the transition of the Bobby Witt Juniors, the Melendez, all our young talent that we want to come later. Is that an important process? And if Whit Merrifield's not any good, or not is at the end of his career, we say that's the cost of doing business, to make sure you've got leadership in that clubhouse when the youngsters arrive.
I think that's the argument that the Royals are making and have been making for a long time. And my response to that is, let's look at the end result. If that were the case, if that has value, it will translate into wins in, at the major league level. And with the exception of the 2013 to 2015, there has been no evidence of this sort of, building an institution where players stick around to be mentors, to sort of ease that transition of the next generation, where it's actually paid dividends in terms of wins. And if you look at other organizations that don't do this, that go the exact opposite route, you see some of the most successful teams, most successful small market teams, because again, this is an issue. Large market teams don't necessarily have to worry about this. They have the luxury of, if you got a great player, you sign all your great players and you don't have to worry. They're the ones who are setting the culture. You don't have to worry about, do we need to give a long-term contract to a Hunter Dozier who, is a grade B talent and not a grade A talent, because we believe in him and he was developed in our organization and he adheres to the ethos of the organization. So you look at small market teams, look at the Tampa Bay Rays. Is there anybody more transactional? Is there any team that has shown players to be more expendable than the Rays? And on a personal level, do I like it? Not really. And do I wish baseball didn't work this way? Yeah, I kind of wish it didn't. But this is the game we have. And you're not going to, you cannot remake the game by adhering to a losing philosophy. You play the hand you're dealt. And if being transactional means putting a winning team on the field, that is ultimately, if you're a general manager, you work in a front office, your first responsibility is to build a winning organization. Having a organization where everybody is touchy-feely and loves each other is a very high priority, but it's not above winning. And the Rays, the Oakland A's have done it. And those are teams that, so to me, it's like, if that had value, those teams would not be trading guys, as soon as they got successful, as soon as they started getting expensive, because they're ruthless about winning. If holding on to those guys would help them win, they would hold on to those guys.
I think we're a Rays victory in one of their World Series away from being able to for there to be no response from the Royals. But as long as the Rays and A's don't ultimately cash for the World Championship, then the Royals organization, the front office, is always going to be able to say, yeah, they have a formula to get to be good. We want to be great, and that's what our formula does. And so, maybe the best thing for the Royals, if indeed, if we, there's a true serum, and we know this is the way you need to go, is to go more transactional. Don't even get to know the names of any of your guys. Just give them numbers or A147 and just treat them like that. If that's the way,
QR codes on the back of their jerseys.
Yeah, exactly. Like stormtroopers or whatever, TK427. Then if that's it, they need the Rays or A's to actually win the whole thing. And until then, I think there is, and I think if you're a scientist about it, right? If you're just unbiased about it, you have to ask the question: is that the difference that the A's and Rays have this machine that'll turn over, but never reach the upper echelon, right? Never get to that part that it takes to win a championship. I personally think no. I think they're fine. I think they're going to win. And the problem is if you keep doing it this way, which I would rather see the A's and Rays way, do you set yourself up to have these moments in time where you're okay, but long periods of being down, looking for all these superstars, right? Because that's what the Royals have said they look for in the draft, is because they're not going to be able to sign them in free agency. They want the superstars. Meanwhile, the A's and Rays at some point break through, and the Rays win 3 out of 5 World Series. And now there's no doubt that is the path to take.
Right. I mean, in the Royals' defense, what you're saying, the fact that the Royals were so obscenely successful in the postseason in 2014, 2015 still gives me a tiny bit of pause that maybe you're right. What you're saying is true. Maybe the Royals did hit upon a formula which, okay, doesn't work as well in the regular season, but allows them to stick together when times are tough in the postseason, which allows them to come back when they're down 4 runs in the 8th inning of an elimination game, and then do it again the following year when no other team in the history of the sport had done it. So there is that part, the tiny part of me that wonders, maybe that was the reason why. And I do think certainly building an organization, we're building a roster from within that 2014, 2015 team, all those guys coming up through the minor leagues together, Moustakas and Hosmer, like these guys knew each other since they were 18, 19 years old. Do I think that probably helped them not panic when they were on the brink of elimination? Yeah, I probably did. And I think that helped them come back. And yes, I think that was a positive, factor on the team. But is that enough to make up for 3 winning seasons in 15 years and, basically, 2 playoff appearances and something like 600 lost seasons? I think at some point the balance of losses is just so great that it trumps whatever you do in the postseason. If you can't make the postseason more than once every 5 or 6 years when there's 10, now 12 playoff teams, how much value is being, having that edge in the postseason really matter?
Yeah, and I got this one. Tony's talking about the Gabe Kapler. I played Gabe Kapler's comments after he basically said, "Hey, we're done with the unwritten rules," and this is the rest of Tony's comments for those of us that are with us on the stream. By the way, if you are on the stream, go ahead and hit the like button, the love button, the follow button, the subscribe button. All those buttons, they don't cost nothing, but they help us out a lot. So if you would, if you enjoy the podcast, and of course, let everybody else know. The point of this that I made about the Gabe Kapler's comments about the unwritten rules and how we're not playing by them and we're going to keep scoring, and it's nothing personal, but we're trying to wear out your bullpen and it gives us a better chance to win the next day. I said that's an organization that literally will do anything and everything it can to win, even at the risk of going out there. I said, look, what are the unwritten rules for? They're there so that you can go out and get beers with the fellas at the winter meetings, right? So that you haven't pissed off somebody when you need a job. And so you send your resume to someone and you didn't run up the score on them. I love what Gabe Kapler did. And I think it's a sign that they will do anything they can to win. They are not worried about anything other than winning today and winning at all times. We know, listen, I joke around and I won't be shocked if there's a new Balco lab found in San Francisco. Nobody, and I know Brian Bannister's cutting edge analytics and he's running things up there. But their ability to just find velocity and all the different things with the pitchers is unbelievable. Same way Toronto, everybody can hit Everyone pounds the ball in Toronto. I wonder aloud, is there something, more nefarious other than, hey, we've got new techniques that are out there to get it done? But there's no doubt the San Francisco Giants are doing everything they can to win, and they turned their whole team over. From when these two teams met in 2014, there's only one or two guys left, like the Royals, and they built it back to a 107 win team last year. I mean, there is a limit to the patience. I tried to get that out of, and I get it. It's maybe unfair of me to put Jeff Passan or an Alec Lewis from The Athletic on the spot because they're guys that need sources, right? And so I can give opinions, and if no one wants to talk to me, so be it. I try to give them in a productive way, but I tried to get Jeff Passan to tell me how long before you say, okay, Dayton Moore, because we've had it up here on the chat room, Rany, 5 or 6 times already. It always comes back around to that. Like, what is the timeline where, okay, we've been patient enough and it's just not working? I couldn't get it from him. I don't think we're there this year, but I think we can see that exit down the road, can't we?
I think we can. Right now, I hate you, Soren, because you completely stole my thunder. By bringing up the Giants, because I had a whole bit about. We don't talk enough about what the San Francisco Giants did last year. I mean, it 107-55 from a team that most, and we could say projection systems, but you could also say most scouts, most baseball people in the industry thought was a 500 team at best. It was the most shockingly good season by, I think, any team in the 21st century. It was really one of the most remarkable seasons I've ever seen from a team. And I'm still not 100% sure how they did. I mean, you talk about you wouldn't be surprised if there was a Balco lab. I would be, because it's not like they had players who hit 40 home runs or
Brandon Belt.
It was a series of guys who all played good. Nobody was like great. I mean, maybe Buster Posey. Okay, Buster Posey's going into the Hall of Fame, right? Brandon Crawford's been there a long time. But what they did was they went out and found guys like, Lamont Wade Jr. and Darren Ruff and Mike Yastrzemski, and found a way to mix and match these guys, because most of those guys don't play every day. What the Giants were really doing was like an extreme form of platooning, where it's not just, oh, well, left-handed hitter plays against a right-hander. It is, oh, this guy has a swing plane that is angled upward. We're going to start him against the pitcher who throws a sinker where his pitches move down into the zone and are on the same plane as his bat moving up through the zone. And they're starting a guy with a high fastball that rises through the zone. We'll start the hitter who's got a flat plane with his bat. And
just before you go too far, Brandon Belt had an OPS from 2011 through 2019, or had a slug of 448. Okay. Had an OPS of 742. The last 3 years, 2021 and this year, 591 and 1,015. 597, 975. This year, he's slugging 667 and 1149. Does that always happen at age 32?
It does not. However, keep something in mind, which is the stadium in San Francisco. They adjusted the dimensions. I'm not sure if it was exactly the same year where he started to hit home runs, but I mean, we remember the 2014 World Series, how massive that ballpark played. You could not hit home runs in that park. It was maybe the toughest home run park in baseball, and it no longer is. They've moved in the fences, I believe. I think it's for left-handed hitters, it's not nearly as difficult. So I think that's played somewhat of a part. But even if there was something nefarious going on there, Brandon Belt played 97 games last year. He's not the reason why they went 107-55. My point, though, is simply corroborating what you said. They'll do whatever it takes to win. They don't have a set lineup every single day like the Royals, who, through 8 games, Ken Gallagher has started one time, and everybody else it's been the same 9 guys every single day. But I think Edward Olivares was supposed to play today, hallelujah, and then the game got rained out. Because you know what? Certain players play better against certain pitchers, and putting your players in a position to succeed is the job of management. And you brought up Brian Bannister. He's one of the guys I wanted to bring up, because where did Brian Bannister obtain his success and sort of became a brief internet sensation as a pitcher who was successful, maybe the best pitcher on his staff, throwing 88 miles an hour? It was in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And I mean, Zach Greinke has credited Bannister with helping him learn how to pitch at a tender age, and really was probably instrumental in helping Greinke to have that phenomenal Cy Young season. Bannister went off to Japan, came back, ultimately retired, decided to get into coaching. Why is he in San Francisco? I've never once heard his name associated with the Royals as a
Well,
coach.
I'll tell you why. Because when he was here, the word coming from the organization was Brian Bannister's got to get out of the numbers. He's too fixated on these things. It's a cluttered mind. He was actually looked down upon for being into all that, right? It was not. And listen, look around at the people. Nobody's different. The front office is no different. Now, have they evolved? I think they have. They've got the Rhapsody, the spin things, the cameras. They're all there. But do they use it? Do they embrace it? Or is it something that really, one day ownership said, are we doing what these other teams are doing? Okay, yeah, let's go put it all in. But do they really embrace it? I don't think so. Right. And so
I hope you're wrong, but I fear you're right. Again, we were talking with the hitting side with Terry Bradshaw versus some of the guys in the minor leagues. I mean, the Royals have Paul Gibson down in the minor leagues who has done some of this work and seems to be on the cutting edge of some of the stuff with Rhapsody and Edgertronic and all of that stuff. A heck of a lot more than Cal Eldred. So there are people in the organization, I think, who do value this stuff. But my concern is they're not the people at the top of their organizational charts who actually have the authority to make dramatic changes, and that's a shame. We talk about Brian Bannister. I knew there was no chance in hell this guy was coming back, but Brian Bannister he's not actually the pitching coach with the Giants. But if he was, he wouldn't be the best pitching coach in the sport, because the best pitching coach in baseball is
Brent
Brent
Strom.
Strom,
Yeah.
right? Who was amazing in Houston, was retired, and then was suddenly mysteriously unretired just a month later to join the Diamondbacks. There's a lot of personnel issues we've known in Houston for several years, so it may just been a situation he wanted to get out of. But I mean, just to me, the fact that he was a free agent this winter, went to a new team, and he was the pitching coach in Kansas City 20 years ago, and was considered by people in the industry, not just among the Royals, I should say, really the whole baseball industry, as a whack job. And it took the sport 20 years to realize that everything this guy was advocating for 20 years ago was in fact true. It's just amazing to me that the Royals had one of the most, ahead of his time pitching coaches ever. It reminds me of the Royals having Bill James on their payroll in the 1990s and just having no idea what to do with the guy because nobody else in the organization believed in anything he said. It doesn't matter if you have a brilliant guy if you won't listen to him.
Yeah.
And the Royals had that with Bill James. They had him with Brent Strom, and everybody, even now with Brent Strom's reputation fully rehabilitated, there was no chance he was ever coming back to Kansas City. And that's just it's a sad reflection of the organization, I think.
By the way, has it always been Strom? Is it Strom now? Because when I covered him here, it was Brent Strom.
It could be Brent Strom, and
I don't know. I trust your.
I don't trust me. I'm a reader. You're a talker, so you probably have the pronunciations down.
How about Brad Keller? Since we're on to the pitching side of things, has he done enough? Obviously not with just 2 starts, right? But he was great for what did he have? 8 starts in the 60 game, 10 starts, whatever it ended up being. He was great back in 20, terrible last year, appears to be locked back in. What do you do? He's got one more year under team control. What do you do with Brad Keller? Do you just ride it to the end? Or is it time to say, okay, this is a horse that we can count on?
That's a really tough one, because I mean, up until last year, he had been consistently successful in the major leagues, despite not being a top prospect at any point, which is obviously why he was available in the Rule 5 draft to begin with. And also, despite metrics, at least superficial metrics, strikeout, walk rate, which were just not that impressive, but he has such a unique pitch profile and is so good at keeping the ball down that it seemed like his success was sustainable. Then last year he went out and, crapped the bed and, started to make you wonder if maybe he was a mirage all along. He's been fantastic so far, but he's going to, you have another year. He's got this year and next year, like you said. I think right now you certainly let it ride. You got to go at least till the trading deadline. Then you have a couple decisions to make. You could extend him. He's only 26. He'll be 27 in July. pitchers are always a crapshoot. I mean, committing to any pitcher more than 3 years is always a dangerous thing to do. Sinker ball pitchers, there's some evidence that they maybe put more stress on their shoulder than other guys, but he's also been very healthy throughout his career. I can't really think of any significant arm injuries. I
He
think
was shut down last
he
year.
shut down, but the Royals, I think, shut down a lot of guys in September. I think we shut down in 2019 as well, but more precautionary because at that point they were already out of it. So the question is, even if you believe in him, if he's pitching really well in July and you're out of it, what kind of value do you get for that guy at the trading deadline? A year and a half. Because if you're going to trade a guy, trade him with a year and a half, not with just half a season. That dramatically changes the return that you're going to get. And to me, I think committing to him beyond 2023, it seems to be unlikely that that's going to be a good idea. So I think you let him ride, and if you're competitive, you play it out this year and next year, or if you're not going to be competitive this season, you see what you can get for him in July.
Well, that's why it's absolutely vital to get at least two of these young starters to be good, and then Asa Lacy to figure things out. We might get to him a little bit later on to figure things out so that you've got – I don't know that you ever need five. You can usually find a fourth or a fifth. Oh, certainly a fifth. I mean, they found Zach Greinke for $13 million this year. If you can get three core guys, you can grab a Greinke and hopefully have another pitching prospect that you're locking in as your fourth and fifth. But you got to get three guys that you control and you can count on. And maybe, they're constantly turning over the way the Rays turn it over, but that has to happen. And I think your point is a good one, because with Keller, if you're going to move him, the time to get value is this trade deadline, not next. We're going to talk about Andrew Benintendi here in a second, but it's this trade deadline, because for pitchers, teams want that extra year of control. It's like, okay, I'm getting him for my push this year, but I'll have him locked in for next year. I mean, the decision time on him, maybe not to sign him, but if you're going to trade him, it's this trade deadline.
Yeah, I think it is. I think of was it the Twins who traded Jose Barrios to the Blue Jays last year at the trading deadline, a year and a half of Jose Barrios, and they got back Austin Martin, who was like the number 5 pick in the draft, basically one pick after Asa Lacy, a borderline top 100 prospect guy. Straight up, you can get a legitimate top prospect for a number 3 or number 2 starter with another year of club control. Right now, Brad Keller hasn't proven he's that guy yet. Again, like he's been at his best. He is a number 2, at least number 3 starter. But I don't think the industry sees him that way, and I think with good reason. Which is why it's very intriguing to me that he has been. He's looked as good as he's ever been in his first 2 starts, and if he can maintain that, and at this point in his career, at his age, there's no reason why he can't be a 32 start, 190 or 200 inning guy. If he can take the ball every 5th day for the next 3 months, and the Royals are in a position where they're not playing for this year, they're going to have some interesting decisions to make, and I think they could get something for him. But again, is this team going to be transactional? Or are they going to commit to their guy because he came up, he was developed in the organization as a Rule 5 guy, and they love him, and that's great. And then they lose him in a year, and they still haven't won anything. And what the same thing that applies with Brad Keller applies even more urgently, obviously, with Andrew Benintendi, who I know we want to talk about.
Yeah, and Terry brings this up. He brought this up a little bit ago, but I wanted to go back and revisit. He said, I still wonder why Hosmer, Kane, Moose, and Escobar all had contracts expire at the same time. Should have spread them out. And that is one of the things that Dayton Moore said to me. I mentioned this last week, I think, and when I interviewed him in the 2020 spring training before things got shut down. And he said, listen, our goal is it might take a little longer to build it back, not longer than it did the first time, but longer than whatever timeline you would expect for a team to turn over. He said, because we want to build it back for the long haul this time. If there's something, he didn't like how hard they crashed, and he doesn't want to be just a certain window team, which, if you're going to play at a championship level for 5 years and then 5 years to rebuild it, I'm okay with that. If you can maintain success, Cardinals style, Rays style. Really, I mean, the Rays do it even better than the A's. The A's never crash with 100-loss seasons, but they do regress. Then I'm all for it. But you do have to start getting some guys signed. And when you look at the Royals payroll right now, there's only like 4 guys signed. And it looks like you're going to be adding in, and maybe this is the service time game they're going to play with MJ Melendez and Nick Prado. By the way, Prado had a nice day today. So did the other first baseman.
Yeah,
had
Pasquantino. Yep.
Pasquantino. They Are they trying? Is that what it is? Is Witt Jr. is going to come up one year and we're going to try to get Melendez and Prado on the next year, so they're playing the service time game with them? But that is one of the things they've got to do. And Andrew Benintendi is one of those questions as well. They stole him. It was a tremendous trade, at least the way he's hitting right now and the way he hit once he got going last year, because nobody that they moved has done anything yet at the big league level. Khalil Lee has been found to be a 4A player, at least to this point in his career, and he was the big centerpiece of that deal. But do you trade? I mean, we're coming up to the deadline on Benintendi. Do you trade Benintendi or do you sign him long term? Like, where is this team when it comes to Andrew Benintendi?
Again, difficult decision for different reasons than Brad Keller, but at the same core is the fact that even though he's performing really well now, I don't know if that there's a consensus that Andrew Benintendi is a truly elite hitter, and if he's not an elite hitter, is he going to age really poorly? I mean, he's 27 now. This is the typical peak age year for a hitter. And as we talked about last week, if anything, hitters seem to be peaking even earlier now. They're early to mid 20s rather than their late 20s. And he came up and was great from his rookie season on. He had an adjustment time, when with Boston, and was trying to hit too many home runs. Kind of adjusted his swing last year. What we're seeing this year, if he maintains this, maybe this is the feather you put in Terry Bradshaw's cap, because right now, I mean, it's only been 8 games, but he's got 4 walks and 3 strikeouts. And even in a small sample size, anytime you see that from a guy, that's a really positive indicator, especially the kind of hitter Benintendi is. That's the kind of guy he should be striving to be. Line drives, walks, prioritize making contact and try to run that OBP up near 400. If you can maintain a 380 OBP, I don't care how much power you hit. You're a valuable guy, even in left field. I think Benintendi's capable of that. But if he's just the kind of player he was last year, where he's slightly above average left fielder, and you have to make a 4 or 5 year commitment to this guy, you're going to regret that by the second half of that contract. If you can get into a 3-year extension, I would consider it.
Well, that's the thing. What does a contract look like for Andrew Benintendi that he would sign? And is he of the mindset that he's betting on himself and he's not going to sign anything and he wants to take it to free agency, which is something you should have a feel for when you acquire the guy, right? You can talk to agents. They all got a million clients. You can get a vibe for what he's thinking. And by now the Royals should know that had to have had at least conversations, right? And have a vibe for it. If you're trading for a guy who's all hell bent on getting to free agency, the Boris style client, then what was the move, right? And why are you bringing the guy in?
Well, if like you said, if they were convinced that Khalil was not going to be a major league hitter, Lee had a 450 OBP in AAA last year. I wouldn't rule out that he could turn into a player that makes them regret the deal, but like you said, 4A might be his limit. The other guys they gave up in that deal have not panned out. So hey, if you can turn 4 guys who are never going to have major league careers into even 2 seasons of a league average everyday player, you do that and figure out the rest later. So I don't blame them for doing that, even if they didn't know he could sign long term. But I do wonder, if they were going to sign him long term, the time to do that was probably over this winter.
How good do you have to be? Like, I'm not who was it? Somebody was, the Mookie Betts deal. I'm adamant that is going to be a disaster, right? Like, signing guys that don't hit the ball over the wall, long range big contracts, I think is a disaster. I remember when Carl Crawford signed, I was like, what are you doing? Right? Like, legs go away. Like, the speed will end. I remember Carlos Beltran even, I stood there at the batting cages talking to Carlos in his final couple of weeks with the Royals. And I said, so what's the plan? And he just, and it wasn't even really what I was getting at, but he just goes, well, Scott says you hit home runs and steal bases, and then in your second contract, or when you get your first big contract, then you just hit home runs. And he went to the Mets and quit running. And he was one of the best base stealers of all time. His success rate was unbelievable. So there are guys that have that, it's not just their ability, do they lose the legs, but then they also just, quit running. And defensive metrics show that guys tend to go up and down, and premier elite defenders seem to fall off fairly quickly. Right? Would you agree with those numbers?
Yeah, and I mean, speed, defense, those things age right? You age out of those earlier, whereas the ability to hit home runs, the ability to draw walks, those are skills you can maintain late into your career. And
So
so your goal
the,
is to adjust your game like Carlos Beltran did. But
right.
if you don't have that skill set and you can't adjust, you're more likely to hit a hard decline.
So the three best OPS years of Andrew Benintendi's career are this year at age 27, 902. Very early, granted, but just saying. 835, his 21-year-old rookie season, and 830, his 23-year-old third season. Um, we would think that the 830s was kind of what he is. What is an 830 OPS guy really worth? Or is it, to me, there's a little bit of, I think the upside is higher with Andrew Benintendi than David DeJesus. But I said about David DeJesus back in the day, David DeJesus is a guy that when you're a contending team and you're missing a left or right fielder, you're like, we got to get this guy because you're going to get a productive major league at bat. You know, he finishes your lineup. You're like, great, no holes in the lineup. The moment you have him, you look at him and you go, we got to have a guy who's better than this, don't we? Like, don't we have somebody who can hit the ball over the wall? Like his career. I mean, I said that guy's going to have like 10 jerseys in his basement. He's going to make a good chunk of change. Going to have a great major league career, but it's going to be from team to team to team.
I will not tolerate your David DeJesus slander on this show.
I
love David, but I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, he had the misfortune of playing for an organization that could not take advantage of his skills,
right?
Which were brought. Like, he didn't do anything extremely well, but he did everything acceptably well, and he was a valuable guy. If you are a contender, like I said, and you have a hole, plug David DeJesus in, absolutely. And if your point is like I think Benintendi is a slightly different player, but I think probably a better player at his peak than DeJesus because he could hit for more power. I don't think DeJesus ever could hit 20 home runs like Benintendi did.
But the point being, is he worth, is he like a chopped up Porsche, right? The parts are worth more than steel in the car, right?
No, I agree.
Is he a part that's worth more trading him off because you can get good prospects for him, or is he something you build with and he's a championship team?
And like DeJesus, if he loses 10% of his ability, is he still an everyday guy? Like, that's the thing. These guys are kind of on a knife's edge where if not, DeJesus at 100% was you could play him every day. DeJesus at 90% was a fourth outfielder. And Benintendi at 90% is probably not an everyday guy. Like, he contributes as long as he can, hit 280. He doesn't have to hit 20 home runs, but hitting 12 to 15 home runs, 50 to 60 walks, and above average defense. You put all that together, that's a 3 and 4 win player. That's a valuable player. But he loses anything. And now you're talking about a guy who's really better off as a 100-game, 300 plate appearance fourth outfielder. And that's not a guy you want to give a long-term deal to. So if he continues to play this well, you don't wait till July. Maybe in June, a team that's got a hole and wants a 4-month solution, an everyday guy. Again, are the Royals going to be transactional? I think they should strongly consider moving that guy. Will they? I think that's far less likely than it would be if you or I were in charge.
I'll tell you what it smells like to me. They don't like to let their successes go. And he has been a success. And as you pointed out, Khalil Lee could still be something. So they sign him, and they end up having to sign him for too many years. And the last 2 years of the deal end up looking like an albatross around the Royals' neck. That he's good this year, age 28, 29, and then 30 and 31. They sign him for 4 or, God forbid, even 5 years. And the back end of the deal ends up being a bad one and has all the money on it, and they can't unload it. And it goes down. That's my fear. That, to me, if you're not 100% convinced on what he is, then you cut bait now and turn him over into a couple, 2, 3 more good young players. And it gets easier to do that if Hunter Dozier's real. Is this what we're seeing? Is Hunter Dozier back? Is this the real Hunter Dozier? And because they loathe him so much seemingly at third base, and I know from talking to Alec Lewis, somebody's filled in with the fact that Hunter Dozier just can't possibly even begin to play third base, which to me is also part of the, we're going to paint whatever scenario it takes to put Mondesi at short. But whether it's Prado at first base, Hunter Dozier at first base, Carlos Santana's not hitting. If Hunter Dozier can hit, you again have a pleasant problem, and you have depth that somebody can be dealt.
I mean, I'm not going to claim anybody is back based on 8 games, right? But if one of the 2 first base / DH types is hitting through 8 games, and one of them is got, I think, 2 hits in 8 games. I'm glad it's Hunter Dozier who's doing the hitting and Carlos Santana that's doing the sucking, because Hunter Dozier obviously is under contract
Right.
regardless of whether we want him to be or not. He's under contract. I think it's guaranteed for 3 years, right? This year and 2, through 2024 with a team option for 2025. And it was a kind of a curious long-term deal to give after a admittedly shortened 2020 where he didn't hit very well. And looked like a complete disaster in last year, negative 2.5 WAR. He couldn't hit, couldn't play defense. I mean, I'm not sure Yuniesky Betancourt at his absolute worst was ever 2.5 wins below replacement for the Royals. That's Nefi Perez 2002 territory. That's up there with the worst seasons in Kansas City Royals history. But unlike those guys,
We'll get to Mondesi later.
Okay, we'll save that one. But unlike those guys, I didn't think Hunter Dozier was a complete lost cause, because one of those issues, his defensive metrics have just been uniformly terrible. That's because he's played third base and the corner outfield, and I think he at first base he can at least wrestle the position to a draw, or just put him at DH and you eliminate defense entirely. But yeah, I mean the defensive upgrade, we talked about this last week, I think, between Dozier and Bobby Witt at third base is absolutely massive. And if that's why the Royals decided to keep Mondesi at shortstop, honestly, I don't blame them one bit, because we've already seen the Royals have won a game because of third base defense. And I think
I've wanted this aloud. So, and maybe you can quantify it for me. What are we talking about? The difference in wins over a season, like in runs saved, like 10 wins is 10 runs is a win. So what are we talking about? Because it's such a reactionary position. He doesn't have range. Well, he's not playing second or short. We're not talking about a guy that the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh step, he's losing with every one of those steps. I mean, that happens. How many steps do you actually take at third base? Are we talking about like from worst to first is like a 6% drop off? Or are we talking about like a 40% drop off?
Right. It's not just about like your range in terms of, you only have time to take 2 steps. So maybe fewer balls get through relative to a good versus bad third baseman compared to like shortstop or second. But keep in mind, if a ball does get past you at third base, it's frequently a double, whereas in short second, it's not. And then it's also about how many infield singles you turn it out, because you have the arm to make that throw from fielding a ball past the third base line in your foul territory, or barehanding the squibber or the bunt that's put down. That's where I think a lot of the value comes in. And the defensive metrics show, an elite third baseman, a good defensive shortstop that moves to third. I mentioned Manny Machado last week. That can be worth 20 to 25 runs above average over a season. Hunter Dozier in like half a season at third base. Let me see here. Yeah, last year 52 starts at third base. He was 12 runs below average at third base. In 2020, he didn't play third base at all. In 2019, he played 99 starts and he was 9 runs below average. The year before that, 10 runs below average in 35 games. 100 Dozier over the course of a full season would be 20 to 30 runs below average. But even if you just take 10 runs below average, if Bobby Witt's a plus 20 defender, and frankly, from what we've seen, I think that's quite possible at his age, with his speed right now. That's a 30-run swing. That's 3 wins. 3 wins just from defense at one position is about as big a defensive upgrade as you can make in baseball. And that's why I've been advocating for him to be moved to third base, because I think that the defense there is so valuable. And so far, I think that's bearing out. Now, he needs to obviously hit more. But Hunter Dozier can still provide value if he can hit enough to be an everyday first base / DH type. He has done that exactly once in his career. But he has done it once. And it wasn't that long ago. It was just 2 years ago. Actually, 3 years ago, but we won't count the pandemic season. It's sort of a mulligan there. He's 30 years old. At this point, I don't think the Royals have much choice given the contract he has, except to give him everyday play for most of the season. I just don't want him playing anywhere but first base or DH. Like, as long as if he can only hurt the team at the plate, that will, he can't possibly be as bad as he was last season. And I think they have no choice but to try.
How long is the leash on Carlos Santana? When you have him hitting, you have Prado, who had a couple of home runs, but you didn't have much else again very early in the season, but is now had a nice day today, starting to push those numbers up. MJ Melendez didn't have much done today, but when they are ready, and both of them got off to slow starts last year, just like Bobby Witt Jr. did, and then hit very well. When they're ready, like there's a tremendous logjam. There's no trade value in Santana.
No. Well, that came and went. Whether we'll never know for sure if the Royals could have traded him at the deadline, but there were certainly rumors that the Red Sox were interested. And I mean, his numbers in late July were still pretty decent. I mean, he just basically stopped hitting right at the trade deadline. And I didn't hate the signing at the time. I admit to liking it because Carlos Santana has a skill that no Royal has had in decades, which is plate discipline. I mean, even last year in the disaster of the season that it ended up being, he had 214. He walked 86 times. It's the most walks of any Royal this century, which kept him from being a total disaster. But, I mean, his bat speed, I mean, he hit 199 the year before they signed him. It was a pandemic year. But you go back to the start of the 2020 season, he is now hitting 206 in his last 226 games. Yeah, he's walking a lot, but he's not hitting for that much power. His slugging average is 336.
Yeah.
At first base / DH, I hate to say it, I think he's done. Yeah. I think for all intents and purposes, his strikeout to walk ratio is still there, which a lot of times for old hitters, that's the last thing to go. They compensate for the fact that they're losing bat speed by just not swinging at anything that they don't think they can hit, and so they can keep their walks up, but everything else goes. And his value on contact is gone. And at this point, it's not even about Prado or Melendez to me. It's about Kyle Isbell and Edward Olivares are on the bench, never playing. You can put Dozier at first base and DH those guys. You can put Merrifield at DH for a day and let them play the outfield. But you've got guys on your bench who are young, who might have value, who might not. But you're never going to know if they're sitting on the bench watching Carlos Santana strike out again.
Yeah, no doubt. By the way, Merrifield plays the infield as well, so there's even people.
There's a lot of options.
That let's get to our minor league minute. I know you wanted to highlight Maikel Garcia. Where
Thanks for giving it away, man. There's no surprise to our listeners here.
Well, I mean, you're gonna okay. Our minor league minute is who? I'm sorry.
Well, it's a guy who's maybe having the best minor league season. Again, it's only been 9 or 10 games in the minor leagues, but I think a lot of Royals fans aren't even aware of who Maikel Garcia is. I think he, MLB.com, he was, let me see, their number 21 prospect in the organization this year. A good prospect, an intriguing guy. He's a shortstop who really started to hit last year, who draws walks. He had like a 380 on base percentage in A-ball. Intriguing guy. He is Alcides Escobar's cousin. And I think Alcides Escobar actually recommended him to sign with the organization way back in 2017. But he sort of moved up very slowly, one level at a time in the Dominican, from the Dominican all the way up to A-ball. This year, in 9 games in Double-A, he's hitting .406. And this is the one you'll like. 10 walks and 5 strikeouts as a shortstop who's only 22 years old. That's a really interesting
at Double-A, by the way.
At Double-A. He's in Double-A. That's the biggest jump in the minor leagues. A-ball to double. He's made that the biggest jump. He's hitting the best he's ever had. He's always controlled the strike zone fairly well, which, especially for a guy from the Dominican Republic, and I think of a guy who's Alcides Escobar's cousin, right. Not something I would have guessed. So he's always had good command of the strike zone, but he's taking it to a totally different level this year. And it's only 9 games, but strikeouts and walks, those skill sets normalize quickly. And it's a situation where the Royals are in no rush to bring this guy up. He's clearly not ready, but especially if you are concerned about Adalberto Mondesi's future with this organization, the Royals may have another option at shortstop. They may not need to move Witt back to shortstop or Nicky Lopez back to shortstop. They want to keep that elite defense. He has a good defensive reputation. He's fast. He's already got 4 steals this year. Had 35 stolen bases last year in 41 attempts.
And really cleaned up his success rate too. He had,
yes,
it had been more of like a 55% success rate. And last year he really had success as far as when he went, he got it.
Right. And I mean, could he be like an Alcides Escobar-like player, but with plate discipline? If you took Escobar and add 30 or 40 walks a season, that's a valuable everyday player. So somebody to keep an eye on, not somebody I think we're going to see at all this season, maybe in September, but especially with the difficult decisions that have to be made about Adalberto Mondesi, the Royals may have another option there that a lot of fans may not have been even aware of.
And blocked at Omaha by really no one, right? I mean, Angelo Castellano.
Yeah. The road to Omaha is open for him when he's ready.
Yeah, Ivan Castillo. These are the guys that are listed at shortstop at Omaha. So yeah, he's definitely got a spot to land and go there. And then listen, and I know when they're not winning, it's frustrating. Again, it's early. What are we, 8 games in, and it's halftime of the first Chiefs game, right? If you're gauging the season, so there's still a lot of baseball to be played. And like I said, one good week, and everybody's going to be singing the praises of the ball club, and rightfully so, right? But at some point, the good problems to have, like if you've got Garcia pushing his way up towards, and you need a spot for him, and you've got, I mentioned everybody over at the first catcher DH log jam that's going on. At some point, moves have to be made, right? The trade that hurts has to be made. Some of your guys got to go, and that'll be the question as to whether or not the Royals can do it. All right, as always, we leave topics on the board, but we will call it there. Call it due to darkness, I guess. We'll say right now. So thank you for joining us again. If you're catching us on the stream, hit that like button, subscribe button. We appreciate it. It does a lot of good for us. So we'd encourage you to tell your friends about the podcast Kauffman Corner with Rany Jazayerli and myself, Soren Petro. Back at it, streaming live. Again, if you're catching us on the podcast later, we are streaming live every Sunday night at 10, schedules permitted. And I will tell you that if you got to follow our Twitter right now to see where it is. Takes a little while for Apple to accept your podcast, but very soon we'll be on all the platforms, wherever it is, so you can tell your friends about it. So for Rany Jazayerli, Soren Petro saying thanks for joining us here on Kauffman Corner.